Good morning, YouTube. I'm back again with another edition of my bookshelf tour, and this first part of the second shelf that I'm going to be covering today. So, this is the first book on the second shelf. This is Buddhist Philosophy, Its Theory and Practice by Herbert Guenther. Herbert Guenther was a very famous Indologist. He was a German, but he remained a professor of Buddhist philosophy at Banaras Hindu University in India. And this is a very highly scholarly account of Buddhist philosophy, especially because Guenther went on to become an expert in Tibetan Buddhism. And it is from a perspective of Tibetan Buddhist uh, that he looks at the other schools of philosophy, and that makes it very interesting. Um, so this is the first book uh, of a scholarly account of Buddhist philosophy. I know you're also interested in what is there on the other side of the shelf, which I'm not picking up, but that's the this shelf is so broad that it is able to accommodate two rows of books. So that's the row at the back, which I'll take on later. So this is the first book. Then there's the second book. This is called The Last Nazi. All these are second-hand books, as you can see. I have all the books that are second-hand, and this book belonged to someone called Dr. Pramod. He was a doctor at a hospital in New Delhi, and this is a book that should have belonged to a doctor because it is about a doctor, perhaps the worst doctor that the history has ever seen, Dr. Joseph Mengele. Mengele was this book, name of the book is The Last Nazi. Mengele was a Nazi doctor who was in charge of the Auschwitz camp, and he carried out the most horrific experiments on Jewish people, children, women, old people. So this is about this fellow Nazi Joseph Mengele, who eventually was not caught by the Allies and escaped punishment. Eventually, he died in Latin America in 1984 or 5, I believe. He was identified through his dental records. So this person, Joseph Mengele, he is called the last Nazi because he was not captured. Uh, Many of you must have seen the series Nazi Hunters, which documents how Israeli agents, the Mossad agents, hunted down the Nazi perpetrators after the World War ended. Many of them escaped to Latin America. The most famous of them was Adolf Eichmann, of course, who was captured in Argentina and then was tried and executed. Um, in that whole series, there were many others, but they were always on a lookout for Joseph Mengele. In fact, when Eichmann was captured, they believed that Eichmann and Mengele both were there in Argentina, but it turned out to be false. So Eichmann got captured, but Mengele somehow escaped, and eventually he could not be brought to justice. He died um, without going through any punishment for his deeds. So it's a very interesting book. I would highly recommend it, by Gerald Astor. Then there's the third book, Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh. Tony Hsieh is an American, Chinese American, and he was the founder of this company Zappos, which is a shoe company, online shoe company, and he achieved great success. So it's a good book which tells you a lot about entrepreneurship, the pressures of entrepreneurship, the delights of entrepreneurship, and it's a highly motivational book. Then there is a little book here which I actually haven't read because it's more a book to be leafed through rather than read, because you see it's full of paintings and a little bit of uh, text. And these paintings were so beautiful that this book I bought in uh, a second-hand bookshop where it was languishing in one end, one corner. And what also attracted me was that the author is John Gebser, who is a very well-known philosopher. So the book is Anxiety, a Condition for Modern Man. I haven't read it, but it's more to be uh, leafed through, to be seen, as it says, visual, because of the delightful paintings. It's very difficult to paint anxiety. Then there is another book, The Winner Take All Society, by uh, Robert H. Frank. Robert Frank and Philip J. Cook. Robert Frank is a well-known economist of the institutionalist school, and this is a wonderful book because as it says, why the few at the top get so much more than the rest of us. So that's what this book is all about. How is it that a few at the top are able to, and this leads to a lot of wastage in the society. So Frank is saying that this social structure, this arrangement is not a good thing because it leads to a wasteful society. Then I have another book by Steinbeck. I haven't read this. In Dubious Battle, John Steinbeck, the famous author of The Grapes of Wrath, the Nobel Prize winning American. It's a book that I intend to read. Then here is a little book called the Aitareya Upanishad by Shankaracharya. This is a text and a commentary by Shankaracharya, translated by Swami Gambhiranand. Aitareya Upanishad is one of the most famous Upanishads, and it has one of those um, Mahavakyas, as they call it, Pragyanam Brahma. Then there's a book by Ayn Rand, The Romantic Manifesto. This is her philosophy of art. I've read other books of Ayn Rand, especially her non-fiction, and she's a wonderful writer in philosophy. She's much worse when she writes novels. I think, though, she's much more famous for her novels, Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, but I have always loved her works like Capitalism, The Romantic Manifesto, and other works, Objectivism, these works. This is a book on economics. As you know, I'm interested in economics. So national income and expenditure, this is kind of a textbook sort of a thing. I haven't gone through it. Then there is a work by V. Madhusudan Reddy called Meta History. In my last episode, I mentioned another book of Madhusudan Reddy, which was Sri Aurobindo's Philosophy of Evolution. So Madhusudan Reddy was an Indian philosopher. He was a professor at Osmania University, and he has written mostly on the philosophy of Sri Aurobindo. And this has to do with the philosophy of history of that Sri Aurobindo wrote in his work, The Human Society. Then I have this History of India Part 2 by Percival Spare. I collect books on history of India as well as history of other countries, and this is Part 1 is by Romila Thapar, which covers India from antiquity to the 1600s. This is mostly from a history of British India as well as post-independence India. A highly recommended book. It's a short, crisp, but very well written book. And the last one, this column 1 shelf, is you can't read it's because it's not visible on the spine, but if you take it closer, you will see that it's Karl Marx Capital. This is volume 1 of Capital, one of the most famous books of the 20th century by Karl Marx. And I possess this first volume. This is the translation by Edward Eveling, his son-in-law, Marx's son-in-law. And this is the book, and you can see here volume 1. I also have volume 2. I don't have volume 3 and 4, which I will get someday. So this is one of the most momentous books, as you know. This is about Marx's philosophy of economics, and how relations of production and the lead to the social revolution and abolition of private property, all of which was there in the Communist Manifesto. But this has been worked out in detail in this volume 1. This is the only volume that that came out in Marx's lifetime, because before volume 2 could be published, he passed away, and volume 2, 3, 4 were brought out by his friend and collaborator and the famous Frederick Engels, whose works also I have, and whose works I like far more than Karl Marx's, which is strange. But anyway, so that brings me to the end of the first column of shelf 2. I'll get back to you with the second column of shelf 2 next time.